When she said she needed space to find herself, I didn't argue. I handed her a moving box and watched her walk out of the life she took for granted. Yeah, I let her go, calmly. No yelling, no begging, just a box, the front door wide open, and a look that said, "Go ahead, explore." That's how 5 years with Elena unraveled over a half-eaten container of pad thai. She blinked like I'd slapped her. Maybe she thought I'd cry, perhaps even chase her down the driveway. But I didn't. Because if someone says they're unsure about you, why should you beg them to stay? So I stood up, wiped my hands, and told her, "Take your break, but not in my house." She hesitated, suitcase trembling in her hand, waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. And as the door closed behind her, the silence wasn't lonely, it was freedom. That was the last night Elena ever saw the version of me who would have fought to keep her. 5 years. That's how long Elena and I were together, and during that time, I gave everything I had to us. My love wasn't flashy or poetic, but it was consistent, real, and unwavering. I showed up for her in ways that only someone deeply invested in another human being can, and I thought that meant something. We met at a friend's outdoor poetry reading, something I normally would have skipped, but there she was, rolling her eyes at a pretentious metaphor and scribbling doodles in the margins of a program. I made a joke under my breath and she laughed. The rest of the night, we sat at the edge of the crowd, trading sarcastic commentary and stories about the worst dates we'd ever been on. I walked her home. She kissed me first. The early months were electric. Late-night conversations, messy breakfasts, impromptu adventures. She introduced me to spoken word and jazz. I got her hooked on classic rock and late 90s rom-coms. We were different in the ways that made us balance out. She was fire, I was earth. She ran on emotion, I ran on plans. And it worked. After a year, she moved into my place. It was small, modest, but we made it ours. Her art supplies invaded every corner. She burned weird incense that made my eyes water. But I didn't care. I was happy. I adjusted my life, my habits, and my space to make room for her. When she lost her job, I told her not to worry. I'd handle the rent until she figured things out. I picked up more freelance gigs, canceled plans, and stretched groceries. When she decided she wanted to start her design studio, I helped her register the business, built her a website, and cheered her on even when she doubted herself. I gave her support, not just emotionally, but practically. I was her stability. When life felt chaotic, I was her constant. I never kept score, never made her feel guilty. That wasn't the point. We had rituals. Sunday pancakes, movie marathons, playlists for cleaning days. When her anxiety spiked, I stayed beside her. When she pushed me away, I didn't take it personally. I just waited until she came back. That's how I loved her, without condition, without keeping count. When her father passed, she broke. I carried both our weights for months. Cooked, cleaned, worked, consoled. I didn't ask for anything, just that she let me in. She didn't always, but I stayed anyway, because I thought that's what love was. Showing up, even when it's hard. I gave her time, space, forgiveness. I held her hand through panic attacks, celebrated her wins, and mourned her losses like they were my own. I planned birthdays she forgot to plan for me. I rearranged meetings to make her art shows, even the ones where no one else came. I learned her triggers, she tells. The tone of voice that meant don't ask, and the one that meant please stay. I thought that kind of love would count for something, that consistency and presence still mattered. So when she told me, calmly, coolly, that she needed space to find herself, it felt like someone had flipped a switch. Like she'd been planning this and just hadn't gotten around to informing me until it was convenient. No fight, no tears, just a clean break like 5 years didn't deserve more than a conversation over leftover pad thai. What hurt wasn't just that she left, it was how easily she did it. Like I'd never really mattered. Like all the times I stayed didn't count because she was already halfway out the door. Looking back, the signs were there. They didn't show up all at once like an explosion. They seeped in slowly, quietly, like water under a door. A slight shift in how she looked at me. A pause too long before answering my texts. The growing silence stretched between us like a hallway. We were too tired to walk down. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd been too distracted with work. Maybe I wasn't being affectionate enough. I doubled down on being attentive, brought home her favorite snacks, booked a weekend cabin trip just for the two of us, and left notes on the fridge reminding her I loved her. But the more I tried, the more distant she became. She used to send me memes during the day, little things that made her laugh. That stopped. I'd reply to her stories on Instagram and she'd leave me on read. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say, "Yeah, just tired," and go back to scrolling. Tired became her favorite word. Tired of work. Tired of people. Eventually, they tired of me. I remember one Friday night, I made dinner, her favorite mushroom risotto with extra parmesan. She came home late, looked at the table, and barely reacted. "I already ate," she said, tossing her bag on the chair. No explanation. No thank you, just, "I already ate." Another time, I caught her zoning out during a movie. Not just bored, disconnected. Her body was next to me, but her mind was somewhere else. I nudged her gently and tried to make a joke, and she gave me this half-hearted smile like she was trying to remember how to act interested. The intimacy faded too. She started going to bed earlier than me, claiming headaches or needing rest. She'd turn away from me in bed. No more late-night talks, no more tangled legs under the sheets. When I touched her, she flinched, like my affection had become unfamiliar. I tried talking to her. I asked if she was unhappy, if she needed something from me that I wasn't giving. She said, "No, of course not. Don't be dramatic." She told me I was overthinking things and that I always made everything heavier than it needed to be. But it wasn't just me feeling it. Friends noticed too. My best friend Alex asked me one night, "Is everything cool with you and Elena?" I shrugged. "Why?" "I don't know, man. She just seems elsewhere." He wasn't wrong. Then came the passive-aggressive digs, little comments about how I never took risks or how I was so reliable it was boring. Once at a dinner party, she joked that I'd probably plan our wedding like a business meeting, with bullet points and a PowerPoint. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but something inside me shrank. I started tiptoeing around her moods. If she seemed off, I'd change the subject. If she looked irritated, I'd give her space. I found myself filtering my thoughts, pre-editing my emotions. I didn't want to start anything. I didn't want her to sigh, roll her eyes, or disappear into her room with the door shut. There was one night I won't forget. We were out with friends, and someone mentioned engagements. Elena rolled her eyes and said, "We're not one of those forever couples. We're just coasting." She said it with a laugh, but I couldn't breathe for a second. I looked at her, waiting for a wink, a signal that it was just a joke. But there was nothing. Just a sip of wine and a change of topic. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't say anything the next morning either. By then, I'd learned something important. In our relationship, it was safer to stay silent. And that's when I realized I was being erased. Not in some grand, dramatic way, but slowly, piece by piece. She was retreating, rewriting the terms of our relationship without telling me, and I was letting her. I was watching myself disappear, and I didn't know how to stop it because I loved her, because I thought it was just a phase, because I was afraid that speaking up would push her further away. But the truth, she was already gone. I was just the last to know. It happened on a Thursday night, one of those evenings where everything feels too quiet, too calm, like the world is holding its breath before dropping a bomb. I'd just wrapped up a long day at work, the kind where all you want is food, peace, and a few minutes to turn your brain off. I heated leftover pasta, poured a glass of wine, and settled on the couch. And then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lauren, someone I barely considered a friend, more like a friendly face through Elena. It read, "Not sure if I should be telling you this, but I saw Elena at the Four Seasons on Saturday. She wasn't alone. They looked together." I stared at the screen and reread it 3 times. Four Seasons? That wasn't your casual brunch spot. It was a highest-end hotel, the kind people booked when they wanted privacy, the kind that whispered affairs and whispered betrayal. At first, I felt nothing, just numbness. Then came the slow burn of disbelief, followed by a rising tide of suspicion. I didn't reply to Lauren. I just sat there, phone in hand, heart beating in a rhythm I didn't recognize. The microwave beat behind me, but I didn't move. Later that night, Elena came home like nothing had happened. She walked in, kissed my cheek, and talked about her day, laughed at something she saw online. She looked me in the eye and asked if I wanted to order Thai this weekend, like we used to, like she wasn't unraveling us behind closed doors. I didn't say anything. Not yet. The next morning, I asked casually what she'd done over the weekend while I was at my parents'. "Not much," she said, sipping coffee. "Just hung out with Rachel. Did some reading," she smiled. Rachel, of course. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but I already knew better. 2 days later, Lauren sent a photo, blurry, taken from across the hotel lobby, but it was clear enough. Elena, dressed up, leaning in across a cocktail table, her hand touching the arm of a man I didn't recognize. The intimacy was unmistakable. I felt my stomach drop. Still, I didn't explode. I wanted the truth, all of it, without giving her a chance to lie again, so I watched closely. In the following days, everything started adding up. She suddenly began wearing perfume again, something she'd stopped months ago. She smiled more, laughed at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Whenever I asked who she was texting, she'd say, "Rachel," again. Rachel had become her shield, her cover. On Tuesday, everything unraveled. I came home early. My last client meeting was canceled unexpectedly. I parked in the driveway, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. But the minute I stepped into the house, I heard voices upstairs. One of them wasn't hers. Man, my body moved before my brain could stop it. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing in my ears. Her bedroom door was cracked open. I heard her laugh, soft, flirtatious. His voice followed, muffled words, a joke, more laughter. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I turned around, walked back down the stairs, grabbed my keys, and left. I drove around for hours, ended up parked by the lake, just sitting in silence. My hands trembled the entire time. I wasn't sure if it was anger, heartbreak, or both. Probably both. I didn't go home that night. The next morning, I returned early before she woke up. I made coffee, sat in the kitchen, and stared at the wall. At 7:30, I went upstairs and packed a suitcase. Not mine, hers. When she came downstairs, still in her pajamas, she looked confused. "What are you doing?" "You're leaving," I said. She blinked. "Wait, what? Why?" I handed her my phone and pulled up the photo. "Because this happened, because you lied to my face and cheated behind my back." Her eyes widened, her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "No more stories, no more Rachel, no more excuses," I said. "I want you gone by noon." She stammered. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted. "You knew what you were doing. You knew what you were risking. You just didn't care." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "But it did," I said. "You made a choice. Now live with it." She begged. She cried. She tried to explain how confused she'd been, how she needed clarity, how this wasn't about you, it was about me. I'd heard enough. "I was your home," I said, "and you went looking for hotels." By noon, she was gone. I watched from the living room window as her sister's car pulled away. She didn't look back, and even if she had, I wouldn't have waved. I stood in the quiet house, staring at the space she used to fill. The silence wasn't comforting, it was suffocating, but it was honest. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't have to wonder who she was texting or what lie she was telling. That night, I threw out the wine glasses we bought together. I boxed up her books, her scarves, and that stupid mug with the fox on it she loved. It all went into the guest room. Out of sight, out of reach, out of my life. And I realized something heartbreaking and freeing at once. She didn't just break my heart. She broke the version of myself that believed in her. And I wasn't sure I'd ever want that version back. The day she left, I thought I'd already cried all I could. I was wrong. That night, as soon as the door closed behind her and her suitcase, I sat on the couch and just stared. Not at the TV, not on my phone. I just stared. The quiet was too loud. Every corner of the house still felt like her. Her laugh echoing faintly, her scent hanging in the hallway, her ghost sitting next to me on the couch. Sleep didn't come easily. I'd lie awake, eyes open in the dark, my chest aching in this slow, constant way like a bruise you forget is there until someone presses on it. And every memory was a finger pushing on that bruise. Her hand reached for mine. Her head was on my chest. Her voice called my name. The mornings were worse. There was no reason to get up. I'd stopped setting alarms. I let the daylight seep in through the blinds like a quiet accusation. Coffee didn't taste like anything. Food was an afterthought. Most days, I forgot to eat until evening, and even then, it was cereal or a piece of toast. I'd lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks, not that I noticed until my belt stopped fitting. I let the house go. Dishes piled up in the sink. Her coffee mug sat there for days. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. The laundry stayed in the basket. Dust gathered on shelves she used to wipe clean every Sunday. I told myself I'd get to it tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. People reached out, friends, family. I ignored most of them. I didn't have the energy to explain, and I didn't want pity. I wasn't ready to hear their voices, not when mine was still lost somewhere in the middle of the silence she left behind. Alex showed up uninvited after a week, just walked in with 2 beers and sat down next to me like it was any normal Thursday. We didn't talk. He didn't ask questions. We just sat there in the dim light, the TV playing some show I wasn't watching. He didn't say it, but I knew why he was there, to remind me that I was still here. I started journaling again. At first, it was just scribbles, anger, grief, confusion. But then it became a habit, a space to put the pain so I wouldn't carry all of it inside. I wrote letters I never sent, conversations I wished I'd had. And slowly, I found parts of myself I'd forgotten I had. Not the version of me she wanted, the version I missed being. One night, I picked up my guitar. I hadn't played in over a year. My fingers stumbled over the strings, but the sound, though off-key, was mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack through the fog. Not joy, not yet, but something like breath. I started walking in the mornings, just a block at first, then 2, then around the park. I'd pass other people, headphones in, dogs on leashes, and for a moment, I didn't feel like the only broken person in the world. I wasn't alone in my hurt. Everyone was carrying something. Healing wasn't a straight line. There were days I woke up angry, days I missed her so badly it felt like my chest might collapse, but there were also days I didn't think about her until the afternoon, days I laughed, really laughed, at a stupid meme Alex sent me, days I sang along to the radio in the car without realizing it. The pain didn't vanish, it dulled. It became part of the background noise, no longer drowning out everything else. And one morning, I made a full breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit, sat down at the table and ate without checking my phone and without thinking of her. That was the moment I knew I was still hurt, but I wasn't lost anymore. I had made it through the darkest part, and I was still standing. Getting through the fog was one thing, starting to see again was another. The real turning point came on a random Tuesday morning. I woke up at 6 o'clock. I am sharp. not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It had been weeks since I felt that kind of motivation. I showered, shaved, and put on a clean shirt, and for the first time in a long time, I looked in the mirror and didn't hate what I saw. There were still dark circles under my eyes, but my posture was straighter. My skin had more color. I didn't look like a man falling apart. I looked like a man piecing himself back together. The little victories piled up. I went back to the gym. At first, it felt like punishment. Every lift reminded me of how much I'd let go, but it also reminded me of who I used to be. A guy who showed up, who didn't quit, who kept pushing even when it hurt. That guy was still in there. I just had to bring him back. Work followed the same pattern. The haze lifted, and suddenly I was solving problems faster, focusing harder, and getting recognition again. My manager pulled me aside one Friday afternoon and said, "You've been killing it lately. You good?" I smiled and told him I was getting there. It wasn't a lie. One evening, I dug out an old recipe book Elena and I had never used and made dinner from scratch, not because anyone was coming over, not to impress anyone, just for me. I sat down with a glass of wine, lit a candle for no reason, and ate slowly. That night, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Pride. Music came back into my life, too. I made playlists of songs I used to love before everything got messy. I'd let them play while I cleaned, while I drove, while I ran in the park. Some songs brought back memories, sure, but others reminded me of the future I still had, the freedom, the possibilities. One Saturday, I went hiking alone. I drove 2 hours out to a trail I hadn't visited in years. The sun was bright, the trees were green, the air smelled like pine and earth. With every step, I left a little more pain behind. I reached the summit and looked out over the valley below, wind on my face, and thought, I made it. I'm here, still me. A few days later, I bumped into Lauren, a mutual friend of mine and Elena's, at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me smiling. "You look good," she said cautiously, like she expected me to still be limping through life. I told her honestly, I am good. It took time, but I'm getting there. She smiled back and said, "I'm really glad to hear that." Alex noticed too. He came by one night and looked around the house. "You rearranged again?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, needed a fresh start." He grinned and said, "Man, you're thriving. I don't think I've seen you this calm in years." I realized he was right. The anxiety I used to live with, waiting for the next fight, the next passive-aggressive comment, the next moment of confusion, was gone. In its place was something better: peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was rebuilding. With every day that passed, I felt more in control and more centered. I didn't need anyone else to validate that. I didn't need Elena's closure, her apology. I didn't need someone new to prove I was lovable. I just needed myself. I started planning a solo trip. Nothing extravagant, just a cabin by the lake, a stack of books, and no cell reception. A reset. A chance to be with my thoughts without distractions. I'd always dreamed of doing that, but never did. Now, I was finally free to make my dreams a priority. One night before bed, I opened my journal and flipped back through the pages. The pain, the rage, the numbness. It was all there. But so was the growth, the breakthroughs, the moments of clarity. I didn't throw it away. I didn't burn it. I just closed it and put it on the shelf, right where it belonged. A chapter I lived through, not one I'd let define me. And as I turned off the lights and lay in bed, a quiet thought drifted through my mind. I'm proud of who I've become, and I'm just getting started. The real comeback didn't need fireworks. It started with silence and presence. Not the kind that fills a room to get attention, but the kind that makes people notice something's changed. It had been nearly 2 months since I last saw Elena. In that time, I'd quietly built myself back up, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The man she left behind no longer existed. I didn't just move on, I evolved. And people noticed. I started showing up differently, sharper, more grounded. At work, I led a high-stakes project and nailed it so well that upper management offered me a promotion and a signing bonus to stay on for another year. I negotiated a remote-first schedule instead. They agreed. I moved some money around and bought myself a used but sleek two-door coupe. Black, clean, unapologetically sharp. It wasn't about flexing, it was about freedom. Every time I sat behind that wheel, it reminded me, I built this with my own damn hands. Then came the invite, Rachel's 30th birthday. Elena would be there. At first, I didn't plan to go, but then I thought, why not? I wasn't avoiding her. I wasn't chasing her. I was simply existing, and this was just another Friday night. I showed up 15 minutes late, dressed in a crisp charcoal blazer over a black tee, tailored jeans, and the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. When I walked in, heads turned, not because I was loud, but because I was different. The calm kind of difference that makes people pause. Elena saw me instantly. Her posture changed, her smile faltered. She didn't approach me right away. I was talking to a group near the drinks table when she drifted closer. It was awkward for her. For me, it was just another moment. Finally, she stepped up beside me and said, "Hey, Noah." I turned to her casually. "Elena, you look," she started, searching for a word. She hesitated, holding a glass of wine like it might anchor her. "I've been meaning to reach out. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from me." "I saw your messages," I said, sipping my drink. "I just didn't see the point in replying." Oof, that landed. She blinked, then nodded. "Fair." Then came the kicker. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I thought I needed space to figure myself out, but I didn't. I just needed to grow up. And I didn't realize what I had until I lost it." I tilted my head. "You didn't lose it, you gave it up." She looked away, embarrassed. "I've changed." I looked her in the eye, "Maybe, but I'm not interested in rewinding." Isn't said with anger, just truth. Later that evening, Rachel pulled me aside. "Dude, you're glowing. What happened?" I laughed. "Let's just say I got tired of waiting to be chosen, so I chose myself." After the party, my phone blew up. Messages from people I hadn't talked to in months. "Dude, what's your secret? You seem free. Are you dating someone?" The answer, not really. I was dating peace. I was dating clarity. But the best part of this revenge arc, I didn't plan it. It wasn't a revenge body or a rebound relationship or a social media campaign. It was me finally living without the weight of someone else's indecision. Elena tried one last time. She emailed me a long, rambling message about her therapy sessions, her realizations, and her dreams of reconciliation. I read it, all of it, then archived it. No reply, no closure, just the end. Because here's the thing, the best revenge isn't about proving them wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's waking up with clarity, walking into a room without anxiety, looking in the mirror and seeing someone you respect. That's the comeback. That's the moment they realize they didn't just lose a person, they lost peace, loyalty, and stability. And they can't get it back, not because you're cruel, but because you grew past the point of return. That's what I did. I grew, and I'm never shrinking again. About a month after the party, I got invited to speak at a local leadership summit. I shared the story of resilience, not the drama, not the heartbreak, just the rebirth. Afterward, a man from the audience walked up to me and said, "I thought I was alone in this. Thanks for reminding me. We get to start over." That hit differently because at the end of it all, my story wasn't about Elena. It was about me, about the millions of people out there rebuilding quietly after someone shattered their sense of worth. We don't need to scream our comebacks. We just need to live them. I wasn't just healing, I was leading. And slowly, I built something bigger than myself, a platform, a purpose. I started mentoring others who'd gone through tough breakups, career setbacks, and identity shifts. My inbox was filled with stories like mine, some messier, some cleaner, but all real. I created a group called Next Chapter A Place for people in transition. No judgment, no pity, just tools and stories and support. What started as a tiny Discord server grew into a real community. People help people walk out of their past and into their futures. Funny, isn't it? Elena thought she was taking a break from me to find herself. But I found more than myself. I found a mission. And that's how I won. Not through ego, not through one-upmanship, through quiet, unwavering evolution. That's the kind of revenge no one sees coming. And once it hits, there's no going back. Months pass. One Saturday, I was invited to a tech panel in Chicago. Afterward, at the networking mixer, a young developer approached me. She was just starting out, full of anxiety about not being enough. We talked for half an hour. Before she left, she said, "I thought success looked like money, but now I think it looks like peace." That stayed with me. I went home that night, sat on my balcony, and let it all wash over me. The old pain, the new purpose. I thought about how far I'd come, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. Elena never texted again. Maybe she finally understood, or maybe she just gave up. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was this. I was whole, not because someone loved me, but because I'd finally learned to love myself. In that kind of glow, it doesn't fade, it radiates, it transforms. And most importantly, it never needs validation, because real power is quiet. And mine was louder than ever. It started with Janice, my nosy neighbor. She stopped me while I was watering my plants. "Noah, did you hear about Elena?" I hadn't, honestly. I'd stopped even thinking about her. But Janice had that look like she couldn't wait to drop the news. She lost her job. She said something about a failed campaign and arguing with the department head. Word is, it wasn't pretty. I didn't say much, just nodded and went back to trimming the hedge. I wasn't going to gloat. That wasn't who I was anymore. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, a mutual friend texted me, "Elena's staying with her cousin now. Apparently things got bad with her sister." Then another, "She's looking for work, not having much luck." Piece by piece, the picture formed. The shiny life Elena thought she was running toward had started to rust. Fast. People she'd leaned on weren't as available now. Some didn't return her calls. Others had their own lives to deal with. The guys she'd spent time with? Ghosted. Moved on, not interested. Meanwhile, is flourishing. I didn't take joy in her struggles. I really didn't. But I couldn't help but notice the poetic justice in it all. She traded certainty for curiosity, loyalty for attention, substance for flashes of excitement, and now she was reaping exactly what she sowed. Sometimes karma doesn't scream. Sometimes it whispers in the form of closed doors and unanswered messages. One evening, I saw her at the grocery store. She looked smaller somehow, tired, hair up in a messy bun, wearing a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and chose not to. Either way, I walked past without stopping, not out of spite, out of peace. She was finally feeling what I'd once felt, invisible, disregarded, unchosen. But the difference was, I didn't let it break me. She, on the other hand, looked like she was still searching for something she thought she'd find in everyone else, except herself. I didn't hear much about her after that. The updates stopped. Maybe people realized I wasn't interested, or maybe there was just nothing left to report. In the end, Elena became a lesson, not a regret, not a villain, just a chapter closed, shelved, and no longer reread. And as far as I was concerned, that was all the closure I ever needed. A week later, Rachel reached out, "Hey, you probably don't care, but Elena asked if I could talk to you for her." I didn't reply right away. I stared at the message for a full minute, then just typed back, "Don't get involved." Her next text, "Already told her no, just figured you'd want to know." I appreciated it. But it also confirmed something else. Elena wasn't done trying. Not yet. Even when everything was falling apart, she still hoped someone would cushion the fall. But this time, no one caught her. That was the difference. When I fell, I built myself a net. She, on the other hand, burned hers while chasing something shinier. I heard from a friend that she'd started therapy, that she was trying to figure things out. And honestly, I hoped that was true. Not because I wanted her back, but because I genuinely hoped she'd stop hurting herself and others in the process of trying to fill whatever void she never learned to name. But redemption isn't granted, it's earned. And I was no longer offering grace where there had been no accountability. That's what made her price so steep. Not the job, not the friends, not even the failed relationships, but the realization that the one person who'd seen her at her worst and still loved her, me, had moved on for good. That silence is the loudest message of all. It said, you had something real, you lost it, and there's no returning to it now. That's the cruelest kind of justice. Not revenge, not payback, just absence, permanent and absolute. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. Because when someone realizes what they had too late, that's when the real pain begins. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be here, at peace, thriving, untouched by the chaos of someone who once meant everything, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am. And what I've learned in this journey is simple. You cannot save someone who refuses to look in the mirror. You cannot love someone into becoming the partner you deserve. And most importantly, you cannot keep setting yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. I don't hate Elena. I don't even resent her anymore. What she did, the choices she made, they were her own reflection, not mine. Her leaving forced me to finally show up for myself in ways I never had before. I invested in my growth. I healed the wounds I hadn't acknowledged in years. I built a life that didn't just look good from the outside, but felt right on the inside. And when the time came, I didn't take her back, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally knew what I was worth. I had boundaries, standards, self-respect. She helped teach me that, not through love, but through loss. So if you're going through something similar, if someone left you confused, broken, questioning your value, listen carefully. Their departure isn't the end. It's the beginning of choosing yourself, the beginning of peace, and most importantly, the beginning of the rest of your life. Let them go, close the chapter, and write something better. There's a kind of strength you only discover when you walk alone for a while. At first, the silence is deafening. The empty spaces feel like they'll swallow you whole. But if you sit with it, if you let the quiet speak, you'll hear something amazing. Have your own voice. Not the voice that compromised to keep the peace. Not the voice that softened so someone else wouldn't feel insecure. But the voice that knows exactly who you are. I started making time for things I'd put off for years. Hiking trips I always talked about but never took, learning guitar, reconnecting with friends I'd drifted from while wrapped up in a relationship that revolved around keeping someone else happy. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about my future. Not because of who might be in it, but because of who I'd become. Losing Elena didn't destroy me. It revealed me. It peeled back every layer of self-doubt, every ounce of emotional dependence, and showed me a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. Confident, content, whole. So if you're still in the middle of it, if it still hurts, keep going. Not toward them, toward you. Because when you finally stop begging for crumbs, you'll realize you were always meant for the feast. And trust me, That first bite of freedom, it's unforgettable.